China's interference into our elections is the biggest threat facing Canada these days. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Brian Lilley and Warren Kinsella. Brian, I say that on the heels of Canada's special rapporteur, David Johnston, a friend of Justin Trudeau's, rejecting the notion of having a public inquiry, but then instead said our intelligence agencies mishandled the information. And I don't say it lightly when I suggest that the interference into our elections is one of the biggest threats we're facing, because it's been documented, it's been talked about. This is a reality. What happens now?
What happens now is I think the opposition parties need to keep up the pressure on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to say, look, what Johnston suggested isn't good enough. He said, we don't need a public inquiry. Just let him, Justin Trudeau's friend, longtime friend, they bragged about it for years. Now they act like they've never met, that he should be allowed to continue to just do investigations and maybe some public hearings, but not an inquiry, because we couldn't possibly do a public inquiry into national security matters, even though we've done them before in issues like Maher-Arar. So I think the opposition parties need to use whatever tools they have to pressure the government. That could include not showing up to work, not saying we're going to boycott committees, we're going to filibuster to stop the government from passing its budget, from passing its legislation. All of these tools, I think, need to be used.
Warren, it's pretty extraordinary times when you'll see an editorial from the Toronto Sun match what and the Toronto Star match one another. It's very rare. And in this instance, I think we're all universally in agreement that there is a need for a public inquiry. I think that there is, look, it's not going to be up to the media or pundits or us or whatever. It is up to our parliamentarians. But of those tools or the things that parliamentarians have at their disposal, we know that the Bloc and the Conservatives, teamed up for a motion, and that was one step. But what can they actually do to force the government's hand to give Canadians the comfort that this is going to be dealt with?
What they can do is what they've done before. Just a few weeks ago, you remember the Liberals were stonewalling and filibustering about getting Katie Telford, who's the chief of staff to Justin Trudeau, to testify. They did everything they could to prevent it. The minute that Jagmeet Singh got a spine and his party said, enough is enough, she needs to testify, the government folded like a cheap suit, and there was Katie Telford in front of the microphones taking the oath and giving her evidence. That's what needs to happen here. Jagmeet Singh, who's part of this government, he has become part of this government, is destroying the brand of the NDP. He's destroying his own leadership by being complicit, because he is complicit in what is taking place here now in this country this week. He is assisting them in the cover-up, in one of the greatest threats to our democracy that we've seen in many, many years. Jagmeet Singh needs to get a spine and say no to Justin Trudeau. That's the big question. That's what he needs to do.
Brian, we're going to have all the Truanons coming after us and saying, oh, you darn conservatives, or, out of the party Liberals, are just out of just angry, and you just hate Justin Trudeau so very much that it's unfair for you to put this all at his feet. But let's just back up for a moment. Resetting the table for Canadians about what happened here. David Johnston, our former Governor General, and yes, I know that Prime Minister Harper appointed him. Yes, I know he's been asked to do terms of reference for other inquiries. I understand all of that. But this is an individual who has, at the outset, talked about his long-standing friendship with Justin Trudeau and his family. Their kids all used to ski together. When young Justin and Johnston's daughters would all ski together with his brothers, etc. Johnson should have recused himself from this in the first place. Now he's given himself an extra job by trying to hold these public hearings, which were just a sham anyway. But what is it now that Canadians can take away from this? And even the most ardent Liberal supporter says, okay, this doesn't sit well. Something is wrong here.
Well, look, it's not just Conservatives that feel this way. The Bloc Québécois, they're a separatist party. A separatist party that leans left, by the way, and has for decades. They feel that we need a public inquiry. The NDP feels that we need a public inquiry. Tom Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP, said on CTV the other day, not only does he think we need a public inquiry, but he backs both Yves-Francois Blanchet, the Bloc leader, and Pierre Poilievre in not going into this committee system that Johnston and Trudeau want them to go into, because he says they can't look at this information and then not talk about it if they find that, yeah, there is a smoking gun. There is more that Canadians need to know. They'd be sworn to silence in secrecy. So this is not just a conservative talking point. This is Canadians writ large believe that we need to know more. And there's only one person standing in the way of that, and that's Justin Trudeau, because our system says that he's the one that can call an inquiry. Well, Jagmeet Singh can force his hand, as Warren was just saying, and I hope he does. But look, Johnston didn't look and say there's nothing to see here. He looked and said there's something to see here, but I've seen evidence you haven't, and it's all fine. Even on the issue of Han Dong, he said there were irregularities in the nomination for Han Dong when he was seeking to become a Liberal MP. Now, he didn't say that that was on Dong himself, but he did say that there's evidence that the Chinese consulate tried to interfere. That is something to be investigated. We've got the threats against Michael Chong, Jenny Kwan. We've got the police stations that are operating illegally. So threats into nominations, threats into election campaigns in 2019 and 21, threats against sitting MPs, the police stations, the Winnipeg lab, all of it. We need more than just David Johnston saying, I've seen stuff you can't, so trust me.
Warren, I'm going to give you the last word here. You know, you're the perfect person to ask about this. You are familiar with the public inquiry circumstance. You know how rigorous it is, how taxing it is, and how in-depth it is. What would, let's just say we were going ahead with a public inquiry, because right now the circumstances are, we know Justin Trudeau is not going to call one. He's not going to override what his handpicked rapporteur said. We get that. But if looking down the road, Pierre Poilievre becomes prime minister, for example, then it's his choice as to who does the inquiry. They set the circumstances. That's out of the Liberals' control then, right? So what would that look like?
Well, he said he would appoint a public inquiry. That's different than what Johnson has said he's doing. Johnson's talking about public hearings, and that's basically blowing off steam. And the difference between a public inquiry and a public hearing is accountability. And so what Poilievre said he wants, and the Bloc Québécois, to their credit, is something under the Inquiries Act that has to be announced, terms of reference set by cabinet, so that we have, it's a legal process. It's not just a parliamentary process. That's what we need here. And, you know, the point that Johnson made, the main point, he said, here's why I'm not recommending an inquiry, because it's national security. And it's like, well, duh, we get that. We know it's national security. Every party in the House of Commons said, yes, for sure. Set up guardrails, set up safeguards so that we're not discussing national security matters in public. We all accept that we can't do that. You know, our allies don't want us to do that. It's not in our national interest. But Johnson did not do that. And I think that's why you've got newspapers, every newspaper editorial board from coast to coast saying this is looking like a cover-up as opposed to an inquiry. And it's got to change. And hopefully if Poilievre gets there, he's the guy who does it.
And dear Canada, call your MP, demand an inquiry. It's one of the only ways that's going to get any action out of this government. Log on to Facebook and Twitter and let us know what you think. Go to theTorontoSun.com. Hit that subscribe button. You're going to find coverage and analysis on stories like this and others you will not find anywhere else.